Commissioners, as the governing body of Clatsop County, all county service districts for which this body so acts, and as the Clatsop County Local Contract Review Board is now meeting in regular session. Please join me for the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have the roll call, please?
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Here.
Great. Looking for a motion to approve the agenda as presented tonight.
So move. Second.
Motion to second to approve the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. We have a presentation tonight. First quarter financials. Great.
Good evening. One right? All right. So I have for you the first quarter financials for the fiscal year 16-17, which ended September 30th. For expenditures, all funds as a whole are currently coming in as expected. And for revenues, the unaudited beginning balances for several funds came in slightly higher than the budgeted amounts. This is a result of realized savings within the funds as well as increased revenues in the prior fiscal year. And this is kudos to all departments who really try to focus on those savings rather than the year coming to an end and trying to spend every last penny. They really focus on trying to be able to roll those monies over into the next year. Within the general fund, we had $743,200 realized, which is more than what we projected in the budget as far as the beginning balance. The general roads fund had $541,000, and the special projects had $1.449 million. This slide here is reflective of the revenue collections for all funds through the first quarter, and this excludes any beginning balances and any transfers from the general fund. The bottom half of the slide shows the percentage of the budgeted revenues collected at the end of the first quarter for the past 5 years. This slide here is for the general fund only, and it represents the actual amount collected, again, less the beginning balances through the end of the first quarter. The general fund has collected 14% of the budgeted revenues, which is up slightly from the previous fiscal year. And this is primarily as a result of the first quarter timber revenues coming in higher in this fiscal year in comparison to 15-16. Not shown in the amount collected is the unaudited beginning balance that rolled over from the 15-16 fiscal year. The unaudited amount is $5.7 million. And as stated earlier, this amount is approximately $743,000 higher than the projected in the current year budget amount. This slide is representative of our major revenue sources for the general fund. The property taxes reflected in this chart are for the current year only, and they do not reflect any prior year taxes or SIP monies, which is the strategic investment plan. The majority of these property tax collections will be reflected in the second quarter when tax payments are due. The timber revenues collected represent both the portion which remains in the general fund as well as the amount transferred to special projects per board policy, and as of the first quarter, none has been transferred to special projects, and we are at approximately 73% collected in the general fund. This slide is representative of the payroll expenses in the general fund. Overall, the payroll for the first quarter is at approximately 22.8%, which is in line with where it should be at this point in the fiscal year. While this percentage is for the general fund as a whole, individual org units within the general fund vary slightly, as will be seen in the future slide. The slight increase in payroll over the previous fiscal year is a result of increased FTE and a COLA increase that was awarded in the amount of 2.5% to all employees. While there has been an increase in insurance rates, the $42,000 decrease in healthcare costs between the 15-16 first quarter and the current year first quarter is a result of the ASME Courthouse Roads employees moving from the previous Plan 5E to the high deductible health plan. This slide represents the overall expenditures through the first quarter for all general fund org units. The majority of the general fund org units are below the 25% mark for the first quarter, which can be a result of either vacancies in positions as well as timing of projects. The dues and special assessments org unit, which is greater than 25%, is a result of the annual insurance payment being made at the beginning of the year. And overall, the general fund is approximately 20.3% expended. This slide is a breakdown of the expenses that are budgeted within the Board of Commissioners org unit for the 16-17 fiscal year. And as you can see, the majority of this budget, the $69,210, or 78% of the budget, consists of the commissioners per diem, with the rest broken out as seen in the chart. This slide represents a breakdown by commissioner for expenses in education and travel and meals, mileage, rental car, and fuel charges and lodging. The total amount budgeted for education and training, along with reimbursed travel, was $13,500, which is split evenly among the 5 commissioners unless improved otherwise by the chair. Through the end of the first quarter, $612 has been spent for such expenses. This slide represents the organizational units within the Public Health Department at the end of the first quarter. Negotiations with the nurses union that came to conclusion following the adoption of the budget resulted in a salary increase greater than the amount budgeted. However, some vacancies in staff positions as well as new hires have resulted in those increases being able to be absorbed into the existing budget. Staff will continue to monitor any changes on an ongoing basis. The household hazardous waste facility is continuing with ongoing construction, and staff hopes to have this completed by the end of the current fiscal year. This chart is representative of the roads department. The roads admin and support org unit is running slightly above the 25% for the first quarter, and again, this is due to the one-time annual insurance payment that has been made at the beginning of the fiscal year, and came in approximately $2,300 higher than what was anticipated. Staff will monitor this to see if savings can be realized in other areas to offset this increase. All other expenditures within this org unit are in line with where they should be at this point in the fiscal year. The road maintenance and construction is also slightly above the 25% mark, which is a result of road oil and chemical purchases. And these purchases are large purchases that create an on-hand inventory, and additional purchases most likely won't incur until spring when the majority of the road projects occur. The equipment and replacement org unit has not yet purchased any budgeted equipment, therefore their expenses are well below the 25% mark. And the road district budget is 25% because the funds that are available to transfer each quarter are transferred upon up to the amount budgeted within the general roads fund. So for all the other org units that are remaining within the county, again, as you see, most of these funds are below the 25% amount for the first quarter, which is a result of many of these funds having budgeted contingencies. Per GFOA best practices, it's recommended to have a fund balance of at least 2 months operating. So by not spending contingency, many of these funds can build up a fund balance to meet or exceed the GFOA minimum best practice standards. Those funds that are significantly above the 25% mark are a result of transfers that occurred in the first quarter to close out the fund, or as in the case of the debt service fund, a result of a budgeted loan payment. In summary, overall funds continue to be in line as budgeted, and those that are running higher will continue to be monitored for other areas where savings may be realized. Through the first quarter, due to some unanticipated costs associated with the settlement of the DA union contract and an increase in grant funding that requires a county match, budget adjustments have been made in the amount of $102,600. This reduces the budgeted contingency from $1.98 million to $1.88 million. So moving on from the quarterly financials, I just wanted to give you an update. As you are aware, in the 16-17 budget, funds were appropriated for an update to be made to the county's existing long-term financial plan. In August, county staff distributed an informal request for proposals for this long-term financial plan to 5 firms. We received proposals back from 2 firms, as well as a letter from one firm stating that they were not in a position at this time to provide the requested services, and the other two firms provided no response. I did speak to one of those a couple weeks ago at a conference, and they said at this time they did not have the staff available to be able to respond as well. So the county manager and I reviewed the proposals, and based on the information provided, as well as some follow-up questions that were addressed in a phone interview, we selected the firm Talbert, Corvola, and Warwick LLP, or known as TKW, to provide these services. Staff will be bringing before the board at a future meeting a not-to-exceed contract with TKW in the amount of $35,050. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner?
Thank you. I'm very curious about the long-term financial plan, and I see that those slides weren't included, so I appreciate we got the rest of the slides, but that long-term financial plan is a very big deal. Do you have a timeline for the progress of the review and revision of the long-term financial plan?
Yes, did you want to speak to, or,
Go ahead.
okay. We're hoping to be able to get something as far as get a contract signed, depending on, because you guys only have one meeting in December, if not December, then hopefully January. And then we're looking at approximately a 6-month timeline.
And will there be broader participation in the development of that plan, or?
Well, so we did receive a plan to completely rewrite, a quote to completely rewrite our plan, but the plan that we have in existence right now has served us well. So what we have done is to kind of bring the cost under control, because what was quoted far exceeded what we budgeted. And so what we've done is we would like to have them reevaluate our existing plan, not create a completely new one, but reevaluate our existing plan and make recommendations as to where it can be improved upon.
That's very interesting, because the long-term financial plan, guides the development of the budget. It also relates directly to the level of service that we're able to provide to the people who pay into those tax coffers. And so I'm very interested in being kept up to date on the progress. I'm interested in the delivery of services insofar as that's possible. And I understand, if I may just finish, I understand you want to control costs. The issue is not just the control of the cost. The issue is in the provision of services to justify the money that we're taking out of people's pockets. So,
And they will be evaluating all of that, and you will be updated on a regular basis. But we scaled back completely writing a whole new long-term financial plan. And so because we have a backbone established, what they're going to do is build on that and see areas where it can be improved, or areas that are deficient, or areas that no longer even really are applicable to the current status that we're in right now.
Yeah, I also think part of the thought process, and I think it's important to note that we actually felt like our current long-term financial plan was working very well.
Yeah, I think
and
it's
so,
a good plan.
we weren't saying, this plan really isn't doing what we want, so maybe we kind of need to start over. We looked at it and said it's actually accomplishing most of our goals for us, and so, let's review it, see if we can improve it.
I understand the opinion of staff and Commissioner Roan that the plan works very well. I have concerns myself about the services that we're delivering. I'm interested in seeing if we could deliver more and better services. So I think that we're all on the same page with that, and I just want to make sure that we are kept advised so that we can continue to work toward achieving the goal of maximum services delivery for our taxpayers.
And we will, and there'll be updates throughout the process. So it's not just, we're not going to just sign the contract with them and then in 6 months let you guys know the results of the study. There'll be updates brought before the board throughout the process.
And the board will have input. Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, any more questions for staff? Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Have a great evening. Our next item is business from the public. This is an opportunity for anyone to give a 3-minute presentation about any item on the agenda except public hearings or any topic of county concern that is not on the agenda. People wishing to speak during business from the public must fill out and sign a public comment sign-in card. Our 3 guests tonight Our first guest is Carolyn Eady. Come on up, name and address for the record. Welcome.
It's just the transfer. Okay. Good evening. My name's Carolyn Eady. I live in Astoria. I want to have a preface. Oops, I'm sorry. I say this every time I testify. Anything I say does not mean I'm trying to cut or close down the logging industry. They're an important part of our economy, but I still think we need to concentrate on sustainable timber harvesting. You should have before you a copy of a memo that I gave to the secretary just before the meeting called the Lynn County Class Action Lawsuit. This memo is the product of more than 20 hours of looking at all facets of the lawsuit, looking up the public statements of the plaintiffs' representatives. Anyway, after reading this, and I can't obviously do everything in 3 minutes, but I think if you read the memo, you will understand why I've come to the following conclusion. It's well known that 3 large timber companies are funding the initial stages of the Lynn County suit, and supposedly to help the cash-poor counties obtain more revenue. After examining these motives and looking at what others have said, I've come to the conclusion there's nothing more than a blatant attempt by large forest industry to gain access to the last remaining state forests and have the state taxpayers pick up the tab. If they are successful, however, wide swaths of these counties will be turned into tree farms. Now, I'd like to highlight what I think are the most disturbing issues about this lawsuit. It's true, if they prevail, if the county prevails, and through all the probably appeals, that Clatsop County will get more than any other county, about $13 million a year. In perpetuity, that's attachment B. If you look up, you'll see the reference. But, and this is the most important point, that's not free money. It comes from the state, and the state doesn't have a pot of gold set aside saying Lynn County lawsuit. And that means we, the taxpayers, will be charged directly and indirectly for that. That's $1.4 billion. So I think the timber companies have the most to gain if this plaintiffs prevail. They will gain access to the remaining forests, or kind of unfettered access to the remaining forests. And it will also provide protection for their bottom line and protect them in case of fluctuations in either prices or demand. And finally, the basis of this lawsuit is flimsy at best. It rests on a premise that the counties didn't know what was going on. They didn't support it. It sort of slipped in. If you look at D1 and D2, there are numerous counties. If I could have about 20 seconds, I'll wrap it up. There were numerous counties, including our commissioner at the time, Helen Westbrook. I think at least 10 counties were wholeheartedly supporting this balanced approach to the general, for the way to manage the greatest permanent value. If you opt in, by doing nothing, you are a plaintiff in that lawsuit. You'll be liable for the possible legal costs, and probably in proportion, we will be getting 37% of that $35 million a year, and you probably would pay proportionately. So it's a very, very important decision. I hope you'll examine my memo, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next guest tonight is Helen Westbrook. Come on up, Helen. Name and address for the record, please. Welcome.
Helen Westbrook, Astoria, Oregon. The Lynn County lawsuit argues that money for trust counties was the primary focus of the 1941 legislation that was developed to let the state accept ownership from the counties for the burned over and logged over forest lands. The Lynn suit says, quote, forest trust counties understood the phrase greatest permanent value to mean the greatest potential to generate revenues for these counties and their local districts. Neither Lynn County nor the other class members consented to the greatest permanent value rule, unquote. Those claims seem to me to be pretty much at the heart of the lawsuit. Actually, there was an advisory committee that was formed by the Department of Forestry to prepare the draft language on the purpose of the forest lands and the concept of the greatest permanent value. The advisory group, including county commissioner representatives, worked on a draft and accepted testimony for more than a year. Then they sent a draft to the Board of Forestry, and the Board of Forestry held public hearings on the proposed draft language. Among the testimony regarding the proposed rule, this is from Don Lindley, a Lincoln County Commissioner, and at the time the AOC president. He says the expanded draft rule is consistent with over 2 years' work by the Advisory Committee and the Board of Forestry, and with the common understanding of the parties to the State Forest Land Acquisition Program. This on Council of Forest Trust Land letterhead is from Jerry Dove, Tillamook County Commissioner and Chair of the Council of Forest Trust Land at the time. He says the Council of Forest Trust Land believes these draft rules set a high standard for managing forest lands to produce sustainable timber harvests while protecting other forest resources, fish, wildlife, soil, air, water quality, and outdoor recreation. The rules need to be adopted without further delay. This is testimony from 2 Benton County Commissioners, Speaker and Daniels, in support of the rules. This is a joint letter of support for the greatest permanent value language from Lincoln County Commissioner Nancy Leonard and Clackamas County Commissioner Judy Hammerstad. And this is a Lynn County Board of Commissioners resolution from the year 2000 supporting the forest management plan that first implemented the 1998 greatest permanent value language. This resolution, signed by all the Lynn County Commissioners, says, whereas this draft plan would be a clear win-win approach under the greatest permanent value rule, it would provide complex structure for habitat, treat a severe threat to forest health, and protect revenue flow and community sustainability. Lynn County gives its full support. You ultimately need to make a decision for Clatsop on opting in and opting out, but the contention of the lawsuit that someone pulled a fast one on our poor little counties in 1998, that we didn't have a part in the process and that we didn't give consent, those claims are just disingenuous at best.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And finally tonight, Suzanne Gladwin. Welcome. Come on up, name and address for the record, please.
In case you haven't read greatest permanent value ordinance, actually, there we go.
Thank you.
So, Susanna Gladwin, 82316 Highway 103, Seaside, Oregon 97138. As Helen has pointed out, many people, including Clatsop County, accepted and signed on to the concept of the greatest permanent value that then went into ORS 530.050. I think I'm saying that right. And Clatsop County should opt out of Lynn County lawsuit. If Clatsop County opted in and the suit wins, State Forestry will be caught between a lawsuit that demands increased cutting and putting income generation over the, quote, permanent values that is laid out in the document I just gave you that is state law. And even at this point in time, there have been concerns that State Forestry might not be cutting sustainably at current levels, and that that may not be sustainable, and I don't have the timeline in front of me, but there have been concerns over the total assessment of how much standing timber there is, and I haven't heard if they've resolved that. If there's even increased cutting, there will be damage to streams such as the Salmonberry, famous for steelhead runs, that has shown increased temperatures threatening these runs because of clear cutting near them. And it will lead to lawsuits, which from environmentalists and other people that say, here we have in state law very clearly that the greatest permanent value is not only the financial income that is generated. And as I've testified another time, that there's huge income generated to the county for people doing wildlife, doing the fishing, mushroom gathering at this time of year. There's much income that is generated from the forest, not just by cutting trees. And by cutting trees, these other income streams can be threatened, especially the salmon habitat that creates the salmon that runs into our oceans and comes back and gets caught, which is a big industry around here. And so I just think that Clatsop County, if they sign into the Lynn County lawsuit, is really putting themselves legally and state forestry between a rock and a hard place. And so I certainly hope that Clatsop County doesn't opt in to this lawsuit, or whatever the legal term is for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that concludes business from the public. I would entertain a motion to accept the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We have an item on the business agenda tonight. This is item 7, authorized participation in the mayor's litigation, page 27.
Commissioners, last week, I believe you got a copy of the Oregonian article. Last week, 11 counties filed suit against the corporation MERS, and your county is asked to consider joining that lawsuit. MERS was a corporation set up to be so that banks could transfer properties, the beneficial interest in properties between themselves without having to pay the county clerk the filing fees. As I've mentioned, Clatsop County has had approximately 10,000 deeds that were filed with MERS as the beneficiary. A number of those properties, the beneficial interest was transferred between banks, and Clatsop County was not paid. The other problem it created was that the people who owned the property didn't know who their mortgage holder was, which became a major issue when the foreclosures started. So the counties have sued to seek the lost revenue, and 11 counties have filed. Multnomah County filed initially in 2012. As you read in the paper, they did disclose the settlement amount, which they hadn't before, but they got $9 million. So the other counties are pursuing it. MERS agreed to stop using itself in Multnomah County as the beneficiary, but it refused to agree to do that anywhere else in the state. So we're still getting MERS filings in this county. And the lawsuit would seek to prevent that and seek to have them pay for all the filing fees that they have not paid thus far. There is a cost of joining the lawsuit. The lawyer is taking the case on a contingent basis. This is the same lawyer that represented Multnomah County, but there is a cost for expert witnesses and initial filing fee type entries. They've asked, I think, for $1,500 as a retainer fee.
And I did want to be clear, at least in Clatsop County's case, we're not talking about anywhere near $9 million. The volume of transactions is obviously much higher in Multnomah, but we think we're probably missing out on somewhere between maybe $35,000 and $70,000 a year in filing fees that we're not getting because this MERS vehicle is being used to transfer deeds and properties.
Charlie, I'd like to make a motion.
Great.
Okay. I move to authorize participation in litigation against MERS and approve the contingency fee agreement with the Moore Law Firm and approve the common interest privilege agreement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to authorize participation in litigation against MERS and approve the contingency fee agreement with Diamore Law Firm and approve the common interest privilege agreement. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Finally, commissioners' reports. Commissioner Thompson.
I'd like to say, first of all, that I so much appreciate the members of the community who continue to come forward and so eloquently and with such expertise express their opinion. We certainly take it into account as we deliberate, and I thank you for your good work, your wisdom, and your dedication to the causes you believe in. I got the very interesting experience of participating in a rural trauma team development course down at Tillamook Hospital on Monday. Cannon Beach, Lila Wickham, former environmental health director at Multnomah County, is busy forming, along with Dr. Bob Wayne, a medical reserve corps. That's retired healthcare professionals. I think, Commissioner Nebaker, you probably have a bunch of folks in your district who might be interested in being part of this, and I've referred the city manager to speak with Lila about that. Right now, the jurisdictional boundaries are the city of Cannon Beach. I think Lila's headed towards seeking the Clatsop, the Cannon Beach Rural Fire Protection District as the new boundaries, which will expand it. What we're looking for is to expand the capacity of locals to organize and respond to catastrophic events, no matter what kind they are. I've seen more burned, broken, and bloody bodies than I care to, but if something happens, really there's no way to tell what we'll need to be able to do. I'm a member of the faith community, which I don't usually bring up sitting on the dais, but when I went to the Episcopalian Convention this past weekend, it turns out that they have a disaster committee and a disaster committee staffer who is interested in going all over Oregon to help members of the faith community become more capable in disasters. I was also delighted to see that at the first evening's dinner, here was the tiny house that they brought over that showed affordable housing, tiny, tiny housing that's affordable and in use, that the Association of Oregon Counties Housing Subcommittee had also looked at. So what we're seeing is that governmental, non-governmental, and the faith community are all joining together to address issues of common concern, particularly housing and resilience training. So that's just really wonderful. The address at the convention talked about the mindset for the new cultural paradigm, which is we've gone from the agricultural age to the industrial age, the knowledge age of the 50s, so now we're looking at the humanitarian age, and the useful mindset is one that has curiosity, creativity, can take initiative, does multidisciplinary thinking, and has broad and deep empathy, sensing the motives and feelings of others. So a way to inspire us and help guide us going forward. Finally, today, I spoke with Jeff Rozecki, 911 Astoria Dispatch communications manager, about having a comprehensive unified system of emergency communications response, 911 response in Clatsop County. Right now, we have Astoria Dispatch and we have South County Dispatch in Seaside. I'll be bringing forward to you a lot of the good work that they've done. County county council remembers part of that. Jeff showed me files this high of studies that have been done. What it would do would be to speak with the governmental stakeholders, both paying and non-paying into the system, which includes City of Astoria, City of Seaside, City of Cannon Beach, City of Warrenton, City of Gerhardt, Clatsop County, Oregon Department of Forestry, then Oregon State Police, Coast Guard, Clatsop County Roads, hazmat alarms, also NGOs like hospitals in Seaside and Astoria, medics, the ham radio clubs, Seaside Aquarium, the wildlife rehab folk, looking at the infrastructure. The goals of the system are to have interoperability and essential redundancy. Teresa, I'll share my notes with you so you don't have to catch every word as I say it. The next step will be looking at what it takes to maintain services to all these entities, look at possible agreements to consolidate 911, hope that 911 will then own its own repeater system. And what that means is that we would have the capacity to communicate effectively within Clatsop County and with the outside world in case of emergency. We'd also be looking at determining cost allocations. You'll be happy to know that Paul Williams will come forward to help us look at those because we have worked with him before. One key issue is to define the governance of a system like this consolidated 911. What would the governance be? Who does it? And how do we share the ownership of it? I think it's very important. I'm extremely interested in making progress on that. That's enough for tonight.
Commissioner Roan?
I attended the Telephonically Northwest Seniors and Disability Services. They opened up a new center. I believe it was in Wilsonville. Could be mistaken. Their big news is that they budgeted for PERS adjustments, but they didn't budget enough, and so they need to watch their budgets and make some choices so that they can provide the services the best they can while meeting PERS obligations. I also attended at the county, the Farm and Forest Land Code Review, and I think we've it was a state grant that for the planning department to work through land use on exclusive farm use and forest lands, and we've, I think, pretty much completed that part of the review, and now the county planning staff hopes to use that and look at residential, mixed-use residential agricultural areas and help the county address what is kind of happening, which is kind of organic agriculture in the sense of it being small scale and residential areas that are hopefully compatible with the neighborhood, but allowing and codifying uses that can occur that would promote economic development on a small scale. That's my report.
Thank you. Commissioner Nepiker?
Let's see, I attended the Astoria Music Festival board meeting, and as with most nonprofits, but especially in the arts, they struggle financially in spite of the fact that this festival has grown in quality and capacity to bring in people. The quality is so high that people are coming from long distances to attend it. So they're still trying to figure out ways to do more fundraising because the new board, the present board, took over when there was a previous board that had a $50,000 deficit. And in the 12 years prior, there was no deficit. But that one new board made some errors in judgment and produced this deficit. So they're struggling with that. But there's a good friend of the festival. That's Sergei Antonov, and you probably have all heard of him or seen his name in the paper. And he comes from time to time from the East Coast to play, to perform for the audiences at extra events. And now his friend Ilya, they both are from Russia, and both masters. And I attended that concert. It's also a struggle for people, younger audiences, to attend classical music festivals or performances. And yet, this festival brings a great deal of revenue to the county. People attend, they go to restaurants, they get hotel rooms, they go to shops. It's a very good thing for the county. So but they're positive, and I'm encouraging them to collaborate with other boards to share mailing lists and perhaps do some other things to cooperate and benefit one another. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Clement.
I met last week with Bruce Buckmaster from the ODFW board for a little bit of an insight and update on what has been happening. Things are kind of coming to a head now because the Kitzhaber plan is going to be supposedly taking effect in 2017, so the end of this year. A very interesting conversation with him. His sense is, and he is only one, but his sense is that won't happen. He believes that there's going to be a pause button pushed, which is good, but it's not really where we want to be. It's good to at least have a pause and realize that the saning is not a viable option, and they have actually acknowledged that universally as a board, that that is definitely not an option and not a good one. So that is kind of off the table. Likely scenario is that they'll hit a pause button and ask for anyone to produce something, a better plan that they can come up with, a better fishing method, another option that they haven't been able to develop over the last 100 years. So we will see what they come up with. That will be decided in December. Could maybe use a letter from us in support of what he's doing on the board and how we feel in Clatsop County about our local industry. But he will let me know when and if he believes it will be appropriate, and if it is, when, and I will submit that to you for possible option. That's my report.
Thank you. A few things. I toured the Emergency Operations Center. Tiffany Brown led a tour for the governor, and it was neat to go out and tour the EOC and see some of the updates from a couple years ago. I was out there and had an opportunity to talk at length. A report was given by Tom Horning, the geologist and just recently elected Seaside councilperson. And he briefed the governor. It was a very fact-filled tour with a lot of information. And the governor had got to make a test call to the Salem office. If you ever get a chance, you might want to ask Tiffany to give you a tour of the EOC. It's a neat place. NOAA meeting, Northwest Oregon Housing Authority. Couple things there. We had our grant was funding for the Canaan, Wapiti, and Tillicum properties, and so we've achieved funding for those 3 renovations. So that is a major hurdle that the NOAA board needed to have taken care of. And the other piece, before we can complete the merger, and I talked about this last month, was that we're trying to get the note that's for Clatsop Shores. We're looking forward to seeing the bank release the collateral so that the trust fund will be made whole But NOAA is now considering keeping Clatsop Shores because it's fitting into the portfolio, particularly if we can have that trust fund collateral released. And so if that's the final piece of the puzzle to allow the NOAA board. So Executive Director Johnson is timeline this, and he thinks that we may be able to complete the merger in January. So that's really good news. It's only been four years of the making. The other item I have is I attended the CREST meeting. A lot going on with CREST. If you've been reading the paper and the controversy over the 8th Street Dam and some of the things that have been said in the paper. And there was the Mr. Aiken Blitz, the attorney for Warrington, had put together a report. And today I handed out our CREST attorney's response to Mr. Blitz's report. This is going to go on for a while, and it's a bit messy. And I think that the report from CREST attorney sets the stage for an ongoing conversation that's continuing. That's all I have. County Manager.
Yeah, just one thing for the commissioners and for the public, a reminder that in January we will be kicking off charter review. And again, we are still soliciting members of the public who might be interested. There'll be 4 at-large seats available, be an 11-member committee. The 7 members that will not be at large, if you feel comfortable, we certainly could begin making those appointments in December at our 14th meeting, or we could wait until January. But I assume you've done some thinking about that since we've talked about it last. And if you do feel comfortable bringing forth, again, each of the 5 commissioners will nominate someone from their district. There would then be a past commissioner and a chair also appointed by the commission. And then I'm presuming that we will hold interviews for those 4 at-large seats, which would involve the commissioners. We would invite candidates, those that have applied, to come in and talk about their interest. But if you do feel comfortable with some of those other 7, not the at-large seats that we haven't interviewed for yet, but if you do feel comfortable bringing any of those forward in December, that just gives us a little bit of a head start on the process.
All right, thank you. Meeting's adjourned. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and we're going to move into an executive session.